Beautiful, and welcome to your second history lesson. This term we are learning all about invaders, and particularly the Anglo Saxons and the Vikings. Last week we talked a lot about which invaders came to Britain, and we talked about where they came from originally. Before we start our new learning today, I've got a quiz for you, so go and grab yourself a pencil and a piece of paper and then come back to me. Okay, so here's our quiz, and each of the 5 questions are everything that we covered last week in our lesson. So if you were listening super carefully and you've remembered really well what we were talking about, then you're going to be fabulous at this quiz today. So pause the video, answer the 5 questions, and then come back to me when you're done and I'll share the answers with you. Okay, hope you got on really well with this and you dug deep in that memory. So question number 1, why did the Romans leave Britain? So the answer to that question was that they went to defend Rome from invasions. So they had to go back to Rome so that they could defend it from other invaders. Name 3 of the 7 kingdoms. So last week I shared a map with you of England and I showed you how it was divided into 7 different kingdoms, and you needed to name 3 of them. So the 7 you could have chosen from were Mercia, East Anglia, Northumbria, Wessex, Sussex, Kent and Essex. Name the invaders. So you could have chosen the Anglo Saxons, the Vikings, the Frisians and the Jutes. There were lots of countries where these invaders came from. So you could have chosen from Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Germany, France, Belgium, Luxembourg and Holland. Well done if you got that correct. And the final question, by what name were the Vikings also known? And the answer is the Norsemen. Okay, so on to new learning today. So we are going to think about, why was Britain invaded? What was it about Britain that made the Anglo-Saxons and the Vikings want to come and live here? So we've got some vocabulary to use today, which includes treasure, settlement, location, climate, temperature, growing season, farmers, mountainous, flatland and fertile and occupy. Okay, so first of all we're going to begin with the Anglo-Saxons and we're going to find out why they came to Britain. Now I've recorded this video lots and lots of times over the last 2 weeks and it won't work. So basically what you need to do is to open Teams and to follow the link to the video, please. So the first video that you're going to watch is why the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. So click on the link that's labelled video 1. While you're watching it, I'd like you to think about the reasons it tells you for why the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. So pause me now, watch the video and then come back to me when you're done. Okay, hopefully you watched the video and you have found out that the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain because they had a difficult way of life. The farmland in Britain was rich. It means it's great for farming. They can grow lots of food. They couldn't do that. What I'd like you to do now is to also watch the second video. So again, I want you to make some notes. So pause me and then come back to me when you've watched the second video. Okay? Okay, hope you enjoyed the video. There were lots of reasons in that one why the Anglo-Saxons came to Britain. It talked about how they the only transport they had were boats. So because of that, they settled in those coastal places. It also talked again about the farming and the climate that we have in Britain. So our weather is much better for farming. It also mentioned those trade routes that the Romans had set up, so the Anglo-Saxons could take advantage of those. The other thing that you might have noticed as well is that, I think it was the first video, was that the Britons were really cowardly and that meant they were easy to attack. So the Anglo-Saxons knew that it would be easy to come and invade Britain. Let's have a look now at what happened when they got here. So we know that once the Romans left Britain, they were very vulnerable. We heard in that first video that they were easy to attack. But when the Anglo-Saxons came and settled in Britain, they didn't live in those amazing towns that the Romans had built. Instead, they built their own settlements, their own places to live, and we're going to look at what they looked like. So in today's lesson, we're looking at lots of different sources that give us information. These are secondary sources. They are cartoony pictures of an Anglo-Saxon settlement. So you can see inside the settlement and outside the settlement. In a moment, you're going to think about what these buildings were constructed from. What sort of activities happened inside that home, and what sort of activities happened outside the home? What did those Anglo-Saxon people have to do to survive? Pause the video, have a really good look at those images, make any notes, and then come back to me. Okay, so here are my ideas. So I've looked at these images and I've worked out that the Anglo-Saxons were farmers. They needed that land to farm on. And the homes they built were built of wood, and they had those thatched roofs made with reeds and straw. You can't tell this from the picture, but actually the doors and the windows always faced south. And that was so that they could catch the heat and the light from the sun. They had no purpose for the large towns of stone and brick with tiled roofs. I imagine those buildings would have been much more secure, but actually the Anglo-Saxons couldn't farm in the towns. There wasn't any land that was good enough to farm on. It wouldn't have been grass. And the Anglo-Saxons they'd never seen buildings like this before, so they didn't know how to look after them. And because of that, the Roman towns ended up falling into disrepair. They became ruins because nobody looked after the buildings. But what the Anglo-Saxons did do was to actually use the stones that were from the buildings and use them for things like walls around their farm and around their fields to keep the animals in. We're now going to move on to thinking about the Vikings and how the Viking invasion was very different to the Anglo-Saxon one, and some of the reasons that they came to Britain are the same, but some of them are very different. So there's another video to watch, so you're going to click on the link in Teams, and it's the third video that you're going to watch. So it's video number 3. When you've watched it and made your notes, then please come back to me. Okay, hope you enjoyed that video and you could see it was very different from the Anglo-Saxons. Yes, they were very drawn to the fact that our climate is better and that we've got good land for farming, but actually that attack was planned. They knew that they were going to attack the monastery. They knew that the monastery was built in a remote place, so it was easy to attack. They knew that the monks were easy targets. They didn't carry weapons like the Viking raiders did. They knew that that monastery was full of silk and gold, which is like treasure to the Vikings. And they could steal that. They could kill the monks, or they could make those monks become slaves. They could sell them as slaves. They were described as a heathen army. Heathens are people that have no religious beliefs. Very different to the monks that they were attacking. And in our next lesson, we're going to look really closely at the attack on Lindisfarne. Next, we're going to look at some different sources. So on the screen, there are some photographs of Hamar in Norway. So you can see from the photographs what the land was like. And then the table at the bottom has got the average monthly temperatures. So for each month of the year, there's an average temperature. Some of those temperatures you'll notice are minus temperatures, so very cold. Then the other information is about the average monthly precipitation, and precipitation is all about water that comes from the sky. So it might be rainfall, but then in the winter months it may well be snow, it may well be sleet and hail. I've also got for you the same type of information but for Lincoln, and Lincoln is in one of those 7 kingdoms of Northumbria. So again, you can see what the land was like from the photograph, and then you can see what the temperatures were like and the average precipitation. What I'd like you to do is have a look at that data and see what it shows you and why the Vikings and the Anglo Saxons would have preferred to live in Lincoln rather than in Hamar. If you need to rewind the video and have a look at the two, then that's absolutely fine. Okay, so we have looked at videos, we have looked at images, we have looked at data. What you're going to do for me today is to put all of that information in one place. You're going to record everything you found out today. So use your notes, as they're going to really help you. In Teams, you will see there is a sheet that says, why was Britain invaded by the Anglo Saxons and the Vikings? These are those sheets that we would use in school. So fill that whole sheet with ideas that you have got from today's lesson. If you can't print it, not a problem. Just write the question onto a sheet of paper and then fill it with lots of ideas. So think about what Britain had that the homeland didn't have. Really think about the climate and think about the land and how it was different. When you've done that, Year 4, come back to me and I'll share what I've got for you. Okay, so I've jotted down some of the ideas that I've learnt about the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons today. So I've learnt that the land was much better for farming, and I know that from the videos, and I also know from those photographs. The temperatures were much better. I also know that the message about the Brits was that they were very weak, they were easy to attack. Thinking again about the land, it wasn't mountainous, it was lovely and flat. You can't settle and farm on mountains. The land is just not flat enough. There's less rainfall. Also, that first video talked about those Roman trade routes. The Anglo-Saxons could use those trade routes to continue to trade. And then the Vikings, of course, wanted to steal gold. They wanted to find slaves. Well done if you got some of those ideas. I'm sure you got lots more as well. Okay, so thank you for listening, Year 4. As I've already mentioned, we are going to focus next week on that invasion of Lindisfarne, and we're going to think about whether those Viking raids were really that terrifying and what they did to make them so frightening. Thanks for listening, Year 4, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.